Good evening, everyone, or I should say good afternoon. Wow, I'm pretty sure everybody can hear me. It's loud up here even. Well, let's get started here. I'm not sure if I have to hit this. Let's see. Yeah, there it is. That's good. Perfect. So we got a little bit of an agenda for us tonight, and it will be quick. This will probably not be long. You won't have to listen to me too long, except on a couple topics. But let's get started. We'll talk about Tanasi. The rebuild committee has been very busy, and I wanted to make a few comments about the committee itself. We are now I don't know if committee is the right word. We are now a massive group of 17. And the reason that we have grown in such size is that we have a member from every committee and several other additional homeowners on the committee to give us a little more guidance and, frankly, a little more bench depth with knowledge in the decisions we have to make. So it's very important that we have that. We have indeed finally put together and received back the RFPs. We do have an architect firm that we are looking to hire. Their name, anecdotally, is Paradigm. We will start next week in setting out the guidelines. And it's going to take us a minute to get through those guidelines. And I also wanted to point out that we will be coming back to the community with some, I guess the proper term is renderings, so that you can get an idea of what we're looking at and some of the ideas about the effects of having Tanasi back and how we're going to manage all those things. So we're going to talk about that some. The temporary building on another side of this project is going to go live hopefully May 1st, and that will open up and give us a much better experience for golfing at Tanasi. We're also pushing the fence back around the building so that you can get in and park, and also to open up a path for folks who are going to the boat docks. And because we've pulled the fence back some, there is a concrete pad that was there in the past at the back of that building that you can now park your carts on, which is much closer to the ramp going down to the docks than over on the side where the current area that was designed apparently for parking. We're looking at probably coming back to you sometime around late June with some renderings and discussions about which way we want to go and what the committee thinks we're going to do. And so we'll have obviously another town hall so that we can put that out and let people see what's going on. And just to clarify, no, we have not made a decision to get rid of the putting greens, and no, we have not made a decision to get rid of the 9th hole. Those are all part of the process as the architect looks at this property, because what we've said to him is, here's your plot of land. Tell us how we can do the best job of getting parking lots and buildings on this plot of land. And they'll come back to us and let us know that. And that way we will have some idea of what is needed and how much of the property will be taken up in that process. Moving on, let's talk about rentals. As you all may have known, I had a kind of a subset town hall of inviting all the people who rent and all the realtors as well who manage people's rentals. And some of the takeaways from that meeting is that the renting folks do not want to be treated any different than any other homeowner. And also, they don't want me in their business, which I don't want to be in their business. So one of the things that I've done is I went to ACC, rather than me make these decisions, I went to the group that has to enforce them and said, here's what I would like to see. I would like us to see that we put in some rules and regulations and some teeth in enforcing those rules and regulations. And I gave them some guidelines about what is possible, and they're going to chew on that. But they apply to homeowners. They don't apply to rentals. They apply to everybody, and that they're going to move forward with that. The other thing is I talked to them a little bit about permits, and all the renters have permits. Well, theoretically, all the people who rent have permits, but actually our documents say that anybody who does business has a home business of any kind within the community has to have a permit. Now, the permits are $50 a year, so, I mean, it's not like that's a big burden on anybody to take care of, but it's important that people do that. We need to know who's renting and who's not, or let me rephrase that. We need to know whose houses are being rented and which ones are not. Several things come along with that. I don't care what you're renting for. I don't care who you have living there. What I do care about is how the house is maintained. So if you rent a home and you set up an organization with your renter, you set up a contract with the people you're renting to, that they're responsible for the exterior of the home. That's good for me to know, because then I would send my letters, or if there's any issues, I'd send that directly to the renter, not to the homeowner, because you've already arranged they're responsible. Now, the homeowner would get a copy just because. But at the end of the day, that helps us go to the right people in a much timelier fashion, and we also know who's renting and who's not, which is, you know, something that we need to have a handle on anyway. So ACC will be coming back at the next board meeting. We'll talk about that in the board meeting, and they'll present their findings and what they think should be the appropriate rules and regulations for the ACC, for the community from the ACC, excuse me. So my last on the agenda is let's talk trash. So a couple things I want to point out. If you were here for the HOA meeting, I talked about trash. If you've been at any of the board meetings between February and March, I've talked about trash. But because I care, yet again this evening, I'm going to talk again about trash. So there's been lots of lines going around about, oh yeah, that was really smart. We signed up with another company and paid them. We signed up with the same company and then decided to pay them more. It's not that way. As I said in the HOA meeting, and as I said at the board meeting, I had a choice. I could have fired Republic, sent them on their merry way, and you would have been between 4 and 6 months without trash pickup. I didn't think that was the right thing to do. Is Republic a miserable company and we will not use them in the future? Absolutely. But if I can at least get you to hobble along with me, by the way, they're my trash company too, until we can get a good company in here. Now there's discussion about the cost. When we originally went out to try and get bids, and we won't discuss all the headaches that went along with that, but all those bids that came in were all $25 or better per month, all of them. Not one was cheaper than that. Most of them were more than that. Plus, the charges that they wanted to levy on us to pick up our larger cans at the restaurants and public works and all that was infinitely more. Like some of them were double what we were paying. So by keeping Republic for this period of time, it allows us to do a couple things. It allows several more trash companies who could not bid because of their, there's a term for it, they're not allowed to bid until after a certain period of time has passed. And so once that's done, then I've got way more people to bid against this. And that's going to give us a better price. It's going to give us more competition. And the contract that we currently have with Republic does not limit us and does not give them the ability to limit us to go out and look for RFPs. So all I've done is kept some kind of trash pickup while we try and get a better company. Because what's going to happen is, in that grand moment when we find that better company, we're still going to have a period of time where they have to ramp up for us. And during that period of time, all of you, including myself, are still going to need trash pickup. And so we've designed this so that once we get that going, we'll agree on that period of time and a cutoff date where the other one picks up and Republic goes away and nobody is going for months without trash pickup. That's the whole part and parcel of why we organized this way. Because I didn't think it was appropriate to just cut them off and have all of you having to go down to all the landfills yourself with your trash for 4 months. And I also am perfectly aware that there are some people in this community who don't even have that ability. So that was the goal in all of this. So I don't want you to think we did something silly. Of course we know Republic is not a good company. Of course, we know that $25 is more than 14, but I couldn't get better for me anywhere else anyway. So that's why we went ahead. I hope that answers everybody's questions, and we'll open up the floor here in a minute and let you ask some more questions on that. The other thing that I wanted to mention, and this is really just a mention because I'm going to go over it in depth at the next board meeting, and I don't want to really spend a lot of time on it other than to let you know the things that we're looking at. There's been a lot of discussion about head count within the association in terms of employment, and that's the royal we've done a bad job of letting you understand exactly how we manage and budget for our employees. And there's two categories, right? Full-time, part-time. So for full-time, we've budgeted a specific number of people to be hired as full-time employees with all the benefits and all that stuff. But we did not schedule and we did not plan on a specific number of part-time people. What we did is go to every director and said, and I'm using round numbers, so please don't say that this applies to any one department. You've got $50,000 to spend on part-time employees. And that's the number I chase. They can have 3 employees, they can have 40 employees, but they only get to spend $50,000 over the year on those part-time employees. Most of our part-time staff is indeed seasonal. Not all of it, but most of it. And so the Wellness Center has part-time people. They call them class trainers. They're not full-time people, they're part-time, and we've opened up several new classes. But again, that director has a budget for part-time people that he has to stay in. That's what we monitor. Same thing for golf, same thing for any of the other departments that have part-time people. They have a specific budget of dollars, not necessarily bodies. So I'll give more detail on that, but I wanted to explain that a little bit because that's not something, I'm sure that would be confusing if you're looking at actual physical body counts that we put out. That's misleading to what's actually going on. And I wanted to be sure that you understood how we manage that and what's our matrix and looking at that. That's about all I got for this evening. Hopefully you guys have some questions or other things you'd like to talk about, but the floor is open. The mic is yours. Oh, by the way, if you want to ask a question, you have to come up to the mic. I'm sorry. Somebody's raising a hand, and I'm like, hi. Yes, sir.
Good afternoon. I think you know me. I'm Larry Rolap.
Have to get a little closer on it, brother. I can hardly hear.
I'm Larry Rolap.
Yes, sir.
I'm I think we're now called the Butter over over by the Telco Clubhouse. Anyhow, you had indicated that you had hired a contractor, or hired an engineer, somebody to come out, a design engineer, whatever you call it, to provide you with a plan.
Yes.
And you said you provided some guidelines to them. Can you share with us what the guidelines were? Because that directly impacts what they come back with.
Sure. I gave them the same guidelines that you all have heard in at least 3 different meetings. This is the square footage we're interested in. These, and we would like these particular amenities to be in this building, which we've all talked about. And you need to guide me as an architect how many parking spaces we need and how we're going to manage that parking lot to that number. So if any of you still have that 386 parking spaces in the back of your mind, I have no idea what the architect's going to tell me. But I did give him the same square footage that we talked about. And we've given him some design ideas about, maybe 3 floors, maybe not, just depends on how he wants to design it. And we're going to move on from there. I also just want to throw this in there so everybody has it in the back of their mind. For argument's sake, if he comes back and he says, well, Chet, yeah, we got what you want, but it's going to cost you $10 million, then I'm going to go, yeah, well, we're going to have to go back to the drawing board. And there is a line that we will not cross. There is an amount of money that we will not go beyond. And even if we go beyond less than that, you will know what that number is before we do it. So there will not be any surprises. And that's the parameters have not changed. Everything I've talked about is exactly what I've given the architect to work on. Yes, sir, you're up. Good evening, Joel.
Hi, Chet. Joel Reed. I'm going to go back to number 2, the rentals in Tellico Village. So I attended the April 6th rental meeting that you put on.
Yeah.
And you said that your top reasons for having that meeting in regards to rentals was to know if anybody had food allergies, to allow you to manage the expectations, such as, you know, if someone's call, if there's an issue, who you would be calling at that location. You do not have a written agreement with the renters.
Correct.
And that you said that you're not looking for money for the rentals.
Sure.
So when I saw the $50 fee per year that you just mentioned, what changed? Why now?
Nothing. That's been the cost of that permit forever. That's not new.
But but you said that there was no, you're not looking for money from the renters. You're saying that that was already in place, that there was a $50 fee, an annual fee for anyone who rents?
Yes.
Regardless
Everybody who rents. Now, I know that.
What he thinks you're talking about is how much they're getting in rent a month. We don't want to know that.
No, that's not
No,
it.
no,
Just-
I think I understand what he's asking.
wasn't-
I don't think he's aware of the fact that renters, people who rent their homes, I keep saying renters and I apologize. People who are renting their homes out have to have a permit to do that, and it's a $50 permit a year.
Every
And-
year it has to be renewed?
And that applies to all home occupations. Like,
Yeah, actually, I guess I need to be clear about that. That applies to all home occupations. It's
Okay.
not just rental, period. It's like if you're an attorney in the community running a business out of your home, you're supposed to have a $50 permit.
Okay. I missed that at the April 6th meeting. Thanks for clarification.
No worries. And I'm sorry, I realize that can be confusing if I don't use the right terms.
This is a long way to walk.
It is.
Teresa Reed, I have a few questions.
Yes, ma'am.
So the Tenassi rebuild, I remember sitting here with a much larger group when we did the Toco rebuild, and the presentation was great about why we needed to upgrade. The situation of why we're upgrading now is a little different because obviously we don't have a restaurant, but I think it's important to look at both. So I'm going to reference the Toco rebuild, which I think is a nice restaurant. I go occasionally. I was there right before I came here. But I don't remember where the pavilion came from. So we've got this pavilion structure that we were sold on that was going to be this wonderful used outdoor space. I live in Tokwa. It's almost always empty. God bless whoever figured out how to use it in the wintertime, but you want to talk about hill jack looking, it looks terrible.
I'm coming around because where I stand.
I gotta go too. Too close?
No, you might be closer.
Okay. No, it's too low. So you've got this pavilion that we had to build that's not being used. It's only at 3 seasons at most. I don't know what it cost. So my question, and I know you know all the questions I could ask, there's a litany of them, regarding, are you guys looking at what the flow of restaurant usage is now, the build of Tenassi, how it's going to affect the yacht club? Is it going to go back into, what did I call it, restaurant remission, where it's closed 75% of the time? And since we're not officially tracking the fact that we have these meeting rooms, do you really need to add meeting rooms? So I love the idea of a new restaurant at Tokwa. I think it's good for the community. But I think it's stupid if we do it just because we need one, because there's no restaurant there. I think we need to do our due diligence to understand the business flow of what we have, what the community is going to support, and if you're going to build something that's going to put the yacht club out of business, what's the repurpose? Well, what's the repurpose for that facility? Because that in and of itself is also a beautiful facility. So you did a survey for the rebuild, and you said, everybody said build back bigger. I would like you to release who those people were, not their names, but what part of the village they came from and what percentage of residents responded. And then will you do a follow-up to us saying, now we're going to spend XYZ dollars on this new rebuild. Do you, in fact, want to move forward with this rebuild?
So the committee itself is looking at all of those, and as we get into the design portion of this, back to my $10 million instead of what I've already talked about, more like the 6 to 8 million, then those are going to be the first things that come out of my mouth is, okay, what are we getting rid of? Because we're not going to spend more. And secondarily, I'm finding out that we do a fairly decent job of tracking all the meeting rooms in the yacht club. And in fact, it's right now booked solid in terms of meetings. The second question comes in is the problem with numbers. For instance, there's a lot of room in the Chota Rec Center for meetings, but they will not handle, unless you go to the auditorium, more than, say, 15 people. And there are several clubs who want to meet that are larger than that. They get into the 20s and into the 30s. I think a couple of them are even 40. And so they're looking for larger space. So we have a choice. We can remodel Chota, and by the way, if it comes down to it, that may be the choice we have to do, is remodel Chota to give more larger meeting space. But it is already, in fact, I had a discussion today with part of my staff about, okay, how do we evaluate? Because I think all of us are not painfully aware, very much aware, when something new shows up, everybody and their Aunt Tina is going to go to it. And so the first 3 months don't count. It's what happens on the 4th month and the 5th month for us to evaluate, okay, is the yacht club really not going to have any business? Is Tokwa going to be down to nothing because everybody's going down to Tenacity to play golf and then eat at that restaurant? All of those things should be fairly easy to monitor because we're doing it now. And I think that we've not had a big drop in golf in Tenacity, and I know we've not had a big drop in Tokwa. So in terms of golf players, when they got nothing there, they're still going down to Tenacity and playing. And the people who like to play Tokwa, they're still playing Tokwa. So the evaluation of that is an ongoing process. And I'd be lying to you to say I know the answer to that yet. But it's still being looked at because all those questions you ask are absolutely valid ones. We have to know that. And it is silly, and I agree with you, it is foolish for us to build another facility with more space when we don't need it.
Well, I would just like to ask that you do some of that, really all of that due diligence in advance of deciding to build this building. So you're building a better community here. Again, I do think we need a restaurant. I'm not one who goes out to dinner more than once or twice a month, opposed to a lot of folks who visit the restaurants weekly. But, you know, just do it right, because that benefits the community. Sure. And again, if you're sharing that with us, I think you're going to get less pushback from people that sit on the side of the fence of naysaying, because I have seen reckless spending. Again, I look at that Tokwa Pavilion. It's a beautiful facility, but they didn't do it right. It's not utilized. And, you know, maybe that should be on your docket of filling this meeting room. Looking at modifying it. So just
sure.
keep
Nope,
that
got
moving.
Got it, understand it. And I think that, yes, please, Mitzi, go ahead, sorry.
Mitzi Lane, for those that don't know me. I just want to add quickly, I work with Simon and Larissa on a weekly basis, sometimes even more often, regarding those rooms at Chota. And, you know, that's the Chota Recreation Center. And by default, we've had to use their recreation rooms over all these years, and we have turned it into a community center because that's the only place we had. Should we move some of these clubs and groups to the new Tenacity, I guarantee you our recreation department will fill those rooms back up with classes as they were originally intended to be years ago. So just keep that in mind.
Sure, but those are the things that we've got to outline. If we're shifting from here to there, then we need to say, okay, well, what are we backfilling, or are we backfilling? And those are all things that we've got to point out and bring out. And as we move ahead and we make different steps and different conclusions, and as I find more answers to give you, I will give you. Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, John Modesto. I had a question about the rentals. Was anything addressed at that? I was not at that meeting. I don't have rentals, and I'm not a renter, so I had really not a lot of interest in that, except that, is anything being done about the short-term daily rentals with Airbnb? Is there going to be any control on that, or is there any control on that?
So currently, and I've talked to the ACC and I've asked them to weigh in on that topic. The reason I'm going to the ACC, by the way, is not a cop-out on my part. They're the homeowners. They're the people who are there to enforce the rules that we have and to evaluate the rules we have. So that's why I've put it back in their lap to look at, because I want to be fair about it. I mean, I have 20 years of experience dealing with these kind of things, and I've given them my opinions, but my opinions don't matter in terms of their decisions. So in short-term rentals, we still do not have any guiding light about how to differentiate between short-term and long-term rentals. They're just another rental. Now, in terms of, and I think I talked about this at the rental meeting, Tennessee, not just Loudoun County, not just Tellico Village, Tennessee does not have a noise ordinance. It does not have a occupation ordinance. Occupation, is that the right word? More or less, it doesn't say if you have a 3-bedroom house, you can only put 6 people in that house. Or if you have a 2-bedroom house, you can only put 4 people in that house. Occupancy laws, that is right. Yeah, occupancy laws. So in saying that, I have no structure to go back to other than for us to put together our own rules and regulations for Tellico Village, put that in with the ACC, and have them decide what we're going to accept and not accept. One of the things that I can tell you future-wise, that we as a community are sooner or later going to have to make some hard decisions about rentals, period. I know that short-term rentals is right now the focus of everyone, but rentals, period. Long-term, short-term, don't care. One of our sister lakes right now, Norris Lake, is operating at 85% rentals in that community, 85%. And from my perspective, as your CEO, that's not what I envision for this community. Now, you may have a different vision. If you do, as I like to say, and everybody hates it when I do, I'm the hired hand. You go ahead and tell me what you want, and we'll put it together. But I'm the hired hand you hired to manage this. So I can tell you now, sooner or later, we're going to have to make some decisions about rentals. And rentals, period. I know short-term is everybody's hot button, but we got to look beyond some of this stuff because the VRBOs are not going away. And if we had a restriction, we would have to make that restriction of no short-term rentals anymore. And there's an awful lot of people in this community who are making an awful lot of money right now using short-term rentals. Most of the people who are long-term rentals have been long-term for a long time. They bought homes, they rent them out for years at a time. I don't consider them our problem children other than when they become the majority of the community, then it's a problem.
Okay, I was curious. I didn't know if there was a definition of short-term versus long-term.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Because it seems to me that one of the reasons that they bought that $5 million of land from Cooper 2 years ago, one of the selling points was to stop anybody from developing the land as timeshare.
Sure.
And there isn't a whole lot of difference between a daily rental
Well, there
from
is,
Airbnb
because-
and
yeah.
timeshare.
If I had somebody in this community, and by the way, we do have a lot of people in this community who own more than one home they're renting. In fact, there's probably a percentage that's higher than any of us want to admit who own multiple homes that they rent, anywhere from 3 to 7. So that number is growing. Why? Tellico Village is a great place to have a rental property, just like Norris Lake is a great place to have a rental property. All of these places attract people for vacation time. We're a lake community. It makes all perfect sense why it works. But at the end of the day, we as a community have to make a decision. And I am putting this on you because it's not a decision I can make for you, even though I'm a part of the community and I would weigh in on my opinion about this. But that's something we as a community have to decide. What is it we want to tolerate? How much rentals are we willing to find? Rentals are not bad in a community, by the way. I would never suggest that you get rid of rentals, short-term or otherwise. But I would really suggest that we find some ceiling on that, some percentage that we will allow, and beyond that, the answer is no.
Thank you.
You bet. Anyone else? Oh man, I thought I was going to get to say, let's go to supper. Kidding.
Mike Braddock, I've got 2 topic areas of questions.
Sure.
First one, the last board meeting, you indicated, if I recall correctly, that the POA was going to be able to sell 11 trucks.
Yes. And what I actually said was I'm going to be at Public Works determining whether I can get rid of 11 trucks or not.
Oh, okay.
For the practicality of it. Now, that was my goal, still is my goal, and I'm not done yet.
Okay, so in my mind, it begs the question, what's going to be the change in business practice or practices that allows those 11 trucks to be disposed of? Can you give some color commentary and context in terms of 11 trucks out of how many? And is that being done with a full view of, okay, we get bad weather here during the wintertime. That requires a certain amount of equipment to put the brine down on the streets, to plow the snow,
Absolutely
et
correct.
cetera. Has all of that been fully vetted and considered?
The answer to that is it is being considered, and no, it has not been fully vetted. That's why there's not any trucks missing yet. But the reality of it is all the questions you ask are valid ones, and there are several things that we can do. Number one, I don't believe everybody in public work needs to drive a truck. So even if I got rid of some of the trucks, it may be not that I'm actually removing a vehicle from public works. I'm saying this person in public works doesn't really need to drive a $30,000 to $60,000 pickup truck. He can drive a Ford Transit that will carry the same material he needs to drive and get double the gas mileage. Because the concept that a lot of people have is that once the truck is bought, well, that money's gone. We don't have to worry about it anymore. Nobody wants to count about all the fuel, all the brakes, all the tires, all the maintenance that goes into those vehicles all the time, every single day. So we have to step back and evaluate all of this before we start saying, well, we're getting rid of all these. My goal is to get rid of as many as I can and not take away from the proper use that we need within public works, as an example. That happens to be where I'm at right now. There's still the golf guys.
So can you give us an idea approximately how many trucks the POA owns at this
57.
point? 57, okay. Okay.
Yes.
That's helpful to have that context. Completely separate topic. It was, I think, made public earlier this year that there is a project being looked at with Tennessee Orthopedics about an expansion attached to the Wellness Center.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I have a concern there. I have nothing against Tennessee Orthopedics. I have nothing against the idea of that. My concern is, have we fully vetted that with this particular arrangement, as I understand it, 15 years, that will limit any possible expansion of the Wellness Center on that side of the building? And that's an exercise room that gets quite a bit of use. I could see within a 15-year period, particularly as the community grows, that we may want to expand that. Mm-hmm. And if we put that project on that side of the building, all of a sudden we're stuck. Not to mention the concept of you could perhaps expand the Wellness Center for additional meeting rooms, because my understanding is meeting rooms are at a premium around here. So
Well, I would say that, but there's a lot of other people in the community that would disagree with that. But I'm not to argue with you.
Yeah.
You're right. I get a lot of that right now. That's why meeting rooms are still on the agenda for Tenacity.
Yeah, but I do question, have we really surveyed residents' thinking and understanding about what we want to do with the Wellness Center, and is this project attached to the Wellness Center really in the best interest of Teleco versus I have no problem with Tennessee Orthopedics coming in, putting a project somewhere within Teleco. We do already have Benchmark down at the, what I would call the Community Building Center as a service in that regard. So I just want to hear some thoughts on that and how we plan to proceed to make sure that we're planning around that correctly. Sure.
Well, nothing has been written in stone yet. We have several ideas. We are looking at several plans. But there's the 15-year thing is the number that's been thrown around. That's not in writing, just so everybody knows. And no contract has been signed for 15 years. But your question is a valid one. Further, if TCO, is it TOC, yeah, me and acronyms, TOC, if their process goes like it's going right now without anything there, I don't think they'll make 15 years. My estimation is they're going to get in that building for about 5 years, and they're going to come back to us and want to build a separate building. So your question is, well, why don't they do that now? And the reality of it is it is a benefit to the community to have them build that for us and pay for it, and we can flush it out later. That's a benefit to us that we don't have to pay into. But it does inhibit us over that period of time they are using that to go out that side. That is a true statement. What we're looking for is balance. How do we balance that and find the right amount so that I'm not spending money on a new expansion to the health center and when I could have somebody else pay for that, and in 5 years when we need it, we really need it, then we're going to be in good shape. Also keep in mind, and this is going to be a touchy remark, I'll just throw that out there ahead of time. We're running out of people because we're running out of lots. And not all the area that we have in this community that is still open can be built on. And so we have to keep in mind, we aren't there yet, but we're getting there a lot quicker than any of you may realize. Meaning we're going to flatline on people coming in and out. And we need to be very careful about how we build to the future, because the future is not that far away. And I use this analogy all the time because I think it's really true. We do not want to be the person who won the lottery and built a $22 million home, and now we can't maintain it. We can't afford to maintain it. And so with TOC building, it gives us a buffer to, if we needed that expansion, because it could be argued whether we need that or not yet, that gives us a buffer where somebody else is spending the outlay at the beginning to put that building up that we don't have to put out immediately, and they're in that building, so if there is a moment in time where the economy is not as good as we would hope it be and people aren't moving here as quickly as we thought they would, somebody else is still paying that bill, not us. So we're not having to go reach into our pockets to figure out how we're going to cover that. So those are the things that we have to vet. There's no question that all of these questions need to be answered, but it's important that you understand we're reaching for a balance. We're not trying to come up with ways to inhibit the community. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Patty Mao, and I just want to clarify, when the Summit Medical Building was added, we built it, they lease it, they will have paid back the construction costs over the 10 years or whatever it is.
Yes, ma'am.
Is this one different where Tennessee Ortho is actually going to pay for the building?
No.
Okay.
Well, let me rephrase that. And we do this deliberately. We pay to have the building built.
Okay.
They pay the loan off.
Exactly. Okay, I just want to understand if
Right.
the same terms
Right.
as, yeah, okay.
Yes, ma'am. It's the same way. That's why I'm saying, yes, we do go out and take out a loan, and at that point, when they move in, they start paying us rent, and that rent is to cover that plus.
And then they would have the option of staying there or not, but if they were to leave, we own the building at that point, and we
That's-
can rent it to someone else.
That's the
Okay,
point. That is exactly the point. Anyone else? Oh, come on, you guys got to do better than this. There we go.
Can't let you go to dinner early. Hey, David Taylor. I've got sort of 3 points. Two of them sort of suggestions or information, and one a question. On the issue of renters and the fact that right now there's no legal restrictions or limits in place.
Yes.
For what it's worth, I spent over 20 years in DC owning a co-op apartment. And that was, in a sense, a community like Telco Village in one building. Obviously, you know,
Yeah,
the
I
scale
managed a
was
co-op
different.
in Delray Beach.
Yeah. For what it's worth, one of the most important things that was in the renters policy was there were co-op requirements for what needed to be in the rental contract. Certain, you know, financial qualifications, noise prohibitions, numbers of people, you know, that sort of thing. It might be a way to go. The co-op had picked 15%, but pick a percentage of the whole community could be rented at any one time.
Correct.
And the concept was used, I believe, I didn't rent out myself, so I'm not positive, but after you had rented out for 5 years, you had to go back on the list to be in that 15%. you know, if it was open, you could immediately do it, but there was a hard limit. Might be worth thinking of provisions like that. I don't golf, so I have less of a dog in whatever fight there is about Tanasi. But I would say two things about the yacht club. I personally think you ought to keep the food service we've got. It's really good. There's nothing like it for miles and miles around here. You have to drive half an hour or an hour to find that level of food. Let's not lose it. And it is central. I mean, I live in Mialakwo, and I wouldn't want the main restaurant to become Tanasi and the yacht club to sort of fail. So I've got to drive way up to hit a restaurant. At least the yacht club is sort of in the middle, so it's as fair as you can get. I would say keep that in mind. And then I had one question. I looked at the long-term land use plan that was sent out recently.
Yes.
And there's a plan for a possible recreation area kind of to the right side of southernmost Mialakwo. It didn't say what the idea was would go there, and I'm just curious, do we have any idea?
No, we don't. Okay. And I would not venture at this point to tell you what that might be. And the golf guys aren't here, so they won't jump in and say, oh, I know. And, you know, we aren't going to do that, no. Anyway, moving on. To your point, normally in most POAs and HOAs, just to give you some guidelines, they range anywhere from 9% to 30% allowed to be rentals. Most of them require that you have 6 months and a day lease, which basically gets rid of all VRBOs and Airbnbs and everything else. So because we don't have any of those things, we are fair game for it all. And those are the regulations that, like I said, the majority, in fact, I can't think of one that didn't have that. Now, 30% is a high number, and I've had several that have that. 30% of this community is a lot of houses. So right now, we're probably at a little over 100 if I include all the townhomes and all that. It's probably a little more than 100. And so that's why I suggest that sooner or later, we as a community are going to have to make some hard decisions.
What is that in percentage?
I'm sorry?
What percentage would that be?
I don't know. Who's good at math? We have 5,400 homes, so it's less than. 154. Yeah. It's 154th. Yeah, it's pretty small at this point. So that's why I'm saying I don't have any really great heartburn over this yet, but the train is coming, and it is a trend within Tennessee for this to happen. So that's why I bring it up. But wait, there's more.
I'm back, just a quick one. I had a condo in Florida during the downturn 12 or 14 years ago. It was an investment property. I did not live in it. And apparently nobody else did in this community either. And I found out that when, at least with FHA financing, and I know this is not an FHA neighborhood, but it might carry over to other financing. If there's over 35% rentals in a community, in a condo community, it's tough to get financing when you go to sell it.
No, it's 0% possibility of getting finance.
Yeah, and so there really needs to be a lid on this.
So I don't disagree with you, and I'm happy that we're having this opportunity for me to at least broach the subject. But let me set the stage for you. Whatever percentage we come up with, and whatever regulations that we decide we're going to attach to rentals, it will take 71% of this community to say yes. And if you allow the rentals to grow at the rate they are currently growing, I can guarantee you won't get 71% because those will be the people who are renting. Just throwing that out there for your consideration, because I can't magically wave a wand and say we're going to do this. It requires a change in the documents. And the only way I get to do that is when 71% of you say, yes, that's what we want. Yes?
Quick question on that 71%. Would that be 71% of property owners and therefore not including
There is no other
renters?
vote but property owners.
Yeah, so renters would not vote.
Oh, renters, the people who rent the houses I'm talking about. More or less, if I'm a guy who owns 10 properties that I'm renting, I'm not voting for that.
Oh,
Yeah, because I'm killing my business when I do that. So that's what I'm getting at. If we let this percentage grow and grow and grow till the point it has teeth in the community in terms of their voting capabilities. And I know there are people in this community who are really, really good managers of their homes. So this is not to disparage them in any way. They do a great job. I'm a renter right now myself, and it was a blessing for me to be able to move here and rent a house till I could find one. So I don't think renting is bad, but I think it does need parameters and it does need control. And all of you as a community, and I'm talking to everybody who's watching as well as the people who are in this room, you're going to have to make some decisions. This is not something the board can wave their magic wand and do, and there's nothing I can do with it. You as a community have to make that decision. And that's going to be a tough one, I think, to make. Someone just asked when we're going to start doing that. That would be a decision of the board, and that would be a decision of the community. So I think that at this point, I'm talking about it, but until the community starts telling the board this is what they want, you can't really fuss about it yet. You got to go to the board and say, this is what we want and we're concerned. And then the board can act on it. Because again, the board actually are the hired hands too as well. They're people who volunteered their time to serve you. And without your guidance and without your comments and without your concerns being voiced to them, then you got 7 guys just coming up with a game they want to play. Okay, that was a little bit trite. I'm sorry, board. But anyway, you get the idea. Yes, sir.
So you made me get up here. Marty Inkrot, I am on the board. And the only reason I came up here was maybe you can expound a little bit on the land use plan recommendation by the Long Range Planning Committee, in that those things are not etched in stone. They're not a fixed plan. They're just recommendations, and then we need to decide as we go along into the future how we're going to leverage that plan and actually what we're going to do with the land that they're talking about.
So one of the things that the land, and I was commenting on this earlier, and again, probably not a popular comment, but the land use has a lot of what they refer to as recreational land. Now, I know there is a ton of people here who says, you know, if we don't build one more house, I'll be happy. But there's a lot of other people who say we need to build all the houses we can get because there's revenue coming in to help support the POA. In that land, we have all kinds of possibilities, none of which, including the long-range planning's suggestions, are in stone. And Long Range came up with those suggestions by your comments. They ran different kinds of, I've lost the term, sorry. They've done all kinds of studies. They've sent out surveys to the community. They've done some math about, thank you, Pat. They've done stuff with the community. They've gone out to other communities and surveyed them to see how they're handling it. And that's how they came up with this usage of most people want more trails, more green space. They don't want to cut down any trees. They don't, you know, the list goes on and on. And my only response to that, which again is probably not that popular, is that's really good and great and I love that. Can't afford not to do that. We just can't afford to just let that land be green space all the time. We need to be able to sell some of that to fund the community, especially if we're growing. Our infrastructure is a part of that. We need to have the money to expand our infrastructure to accommodate building more homes. And that's the catch-22. We can't build more without keeping our infrastructure up, and we can't keep our infrastructure up if we don't build more. So, you know, you get bit either way here. So as we move forward, long-range planning is simply a reflection of what you all have told them. And as we move into this, you as a community, as homeowners, all of you, have to make some decisions. And as I said with the rental as a really great example, they're not going to be simple. They're not going to be easy. They're going to be ones that you're going to have your long-range planning about what this community is going to be. Years ago, I managed a property on Sanibel, and I was going through the whole process of doing reserves. At that time in the state of Florida, you had two choices. Either you had reserves and you had to fund them, or you could choose to opt out and do nothing. This particular community had chose to do nothing, and to make a long story short, Wilma came through and destroyed their property, and they had to come up with 40-something thousand apiece. Anyway, the real issue is they had to start looking at things differently. And there were several people in that community who I made the comment, well, we've got 10 years now, we can build up our reserves so that we can protect ourselves, and it'll take about 10 years. And one of the guys in the audience says, I'm 87, I could care less if we have that money in 10 years. Well, I get that, but we all have to have our long-range planning hat on, whether we're going to be here or not, because this community has been here for 30 years. It needs to continue. It needs to grow. It needs to have all of the amenities that all of you so much enjoy maintained appropriately. And that's really the goal, because I know that there will come a time where we stop with amenities, where we stop with, which don't have the growth, and we're going to have to maintain what we have at the level that we want to keep it at. And so that will be our challenge at that point. But you as a community have to start getting your head around what it is you want. What do you want to see Tellico Village become? Some of you have lived here for 20 and 30 years. It is not the Tellico Village you moved into. We have paved roads. You know, there wasn't paved roads when some of you moved in, and some of the roads that currently are our main drags were nothing but gravel. And by the way, most of the people who bought in here originally were summer homes. They weren't full-time. So our whole topology, our whole, not just the topology of the group, but all the type of community we've become has changed. It's not what it was originally set up to be. And that's okay. All things evolve. All communities evolve into what they want to be or how they want to be. So you as homeowners have to embrace that reality and start saying, how do we as a group of homeowners want to evolve? And you have to get a collective voice coming to the board so that the board can act on those things. And I can help. Yes, ma'am. That's a guess, and I'll tell you my guess is I don't know. Beth's looking at me like you've lost your mind, Chet. It's a guess, but I think it's only about 1,800 homes that are 1,800 lots that are left buildable. See, I'm sorry, 13? 1,300 lots that have not been built on. Now, in my head, I don't think that includes the lots that have already previously been sold and are sitting empty. Those are just lots we have that we can sell to the future. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, Teresa Reed. I can be heard much better with the mic, so come on down if you guys have questions, because I can't hear you when you holler. But anyhow, I do have a rental here in the community, and I want to speak to rentals. So I hear you. It sounds like you're trying to get something from us that you want us to say about these rentals. So in my opinion, you and the board should decide what that number is. 15%? Mm-hmm. I think 30% is too high. When I was in Kettering, Ohio, they had 36% rentals. And
Couldn't agree with you more.
You could tell. You could tell. So pick your number of what the percentage is, and then I think you and all your little minions should run around and find out how many rentals there are.
Whoa, you guys are minions now.
Well, I didn't mean that disrespectfully. So, I know everybody that volunteers on the board does a ton of work. Maybe you find neighborhood watch captains or whatever, and you just drop stuff in people's mailbox. We'd like to know if you rent or if you own, for the purpose of understanding what our ratio of ownership to rentals are. And so the reason I'm here saying this is because I think this parlays into understanding the business flow of who's using the restaurants. We're not asking those questions. We're not finding out how to understand that information. Who's using or what the utilization is of the meeting rooms. One of the letter groups, ACC or whomever it is, said that there's an online service where you can sign up to use the rentals. The meeting rooms.
Yes.
And if you use that, they can see collectively.
Oh, I know. That's why I'm saying I can do that. I can get that.
Correct. So whoever told me this said that they just aren't using that. If they call up at the yacht club and say, hey, I want to use rent, ABC room, that doesn't go into that.
And that's not true. No, when people call in, even to my office, when they want to use the board meeting room there in the administration building, all of those are still going into that system because everybody has to see it, because just because you called in, even if you call the yacht club, they have to get on that system and do it.
Okay, well, that's great. I did not understand it, so that's fantastic news to hear.
Yeah, so they don't, nobody gets it willy-nilly. It still has to go into the system. Whether we put it in or they put it in, it doesn't matter. It's still got to go in the system.
Okay, so fantastic. Back to the rental thing. I think that's a simple way to figure out who the rentals are.
Sure.
And then from there, again, you guys because as a rental owner, one of my motivations was, I'm 29 years old, but someday I'll die and leave my husband, who will be alone, and the house will be too big, and maybe he doesn't want to take care of it, but he wants to stay here, so he's going to go rent from somebody. So that was the rationale. There is always going to be a need. So you want some of those rentals to provide that need when we become a widow or a widower, and we don't want to leave our friends. Our family loves us, but they don't know us anymore because we've been here for 20 years. We become a burden if we have to move away.
Sure.
So providing that rental opportunity long-term. I know VRBO is very different, but so, you want that right mix to make sure.
I agree completely, and that's the balance I'm talking about. And by the way, long-term planning has taken some of the things you just decided, or just discussed, excuse me, into their calculations about what we should or shouldn't do. Because we live in an aging population here. Let's just be clear.
Right. We're all
And
gonna
so
die one
your
day, right.
scenario is not silly. It's commonplace. It happens all the time.
I'm just really not 29, in case you were curious.
Right, and Joel, she says she's going first, brother. I don't know. I'm not buying that, just so you know.
If you need help with that, I'm certainly glad to be part of making
bet.
things happen there. Thanks.
You bet. Thanks you. Okay, anything else? Thank you all for coming, and thank you for the good questions, sincerely. Next time, it'll probably be in the yacht club if we have this same group, but the reason we didn't do it this time is because there was no elevator, so we thought it would be appropriate to have it here. Thanks.